Foxe's Christian Martyrs of the World by John Foxe. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb, and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto death. Introduction. John Foxe was born in 1516 in Boston, Lincolnshire, England. At the age of 16, he went to Oxford, where he received his B.A. in 1537, became a professor, and completed his master's in 1543. While teaching at Oxford, he became good friends with Hugh Latimer and William Tyndale, embracing Protestantism. His views were more extreme than his college allowed, so he left the university in 1545, married, and moved to London, where he became the tutor of the Duke of Norfolk's grandchildren. Foxe was ordained a deacon of the Church of England and worked for the Reformation, writing several tracts and beginning work on his account of Christian martyrs, but was forced to leave the country in 1553 when the Catholic Queen Mary took the throne. The first part of his book was published in 1554 in Strasbourg, France. He then went to Frankfurt to support John Knox's Calvinistic party and moved to Basel, Switzerland, where he served as a printer's proofreader. Manuscripts and eyewitness accounts of the Protestants' persecution under Queen Mary were forwarded to Foxe in Basel, and he continued to work on his book, publishing the completed manuscript in 1559, the year after Queen Elizabeth I took the throne. Returning to England, he filled in more details, translated the book into English, and printed it in March of 1563 under the title Acts and Monuments of These Latter and Perilous Days. Becoming popularly known as the Book of Martyrs, the text was widely read by English Puritans, shaping popular opinion about Catholicism for at least a century. Foxe was ordained an Anglican priest in 1560, but refused all church offices because of his Puritan beliefs. He continued to preach and publish his sermons, however ministered to the victims of the plague of 1563, then begged Queen Elizabeth not to execute Anabaptists in 1577 and the Jesuits in 1581. Meanwhile, the Book of Martyrs was installed in English churches, read to the shipmates of Sir Francis Drake, and studied by Puritan families who considered it a vital part of the education of their children. Foxe died in April of 1587 and was buried at St. Giles Church, Cripplegate, London. His wife survived him by 18 years. They had at least 5 children. This edition is a retelling of Foxe's major stories in modern English and should be readily understandable by both children and adults. Chapter 1. The Persecution of Early Christians. In the Gospel of Matthew, we read that Simon Peter was the first person to openly acknowledge Jesus as the Son of God, and that Jesus, seeking God's hand in this acknowledgement, called Peter a rock on which he would build his church, a church that even the gates of hell would not be able to defeat. This indicates 3 things. First, that Christ will have a church in this world. Secondly, that the church would be persecuted, not only by the world, but also by the powers of hell. Thirdly, despite its persecutions, the church would survive. The whole history of the church to this day verifies this prophecy of Christ. Princes, kings, and other rulers of this world have used all their strength and cunning against the church, yet it continues to endure and hold its own. The storms it has overcome are remarkable. I have written this history so the wonderful works of God within the church will be visible to all who might profit from them. Of all the people who heard Jesus speak, the Pharisees and scribes should have been the first to accept him, since they were so familiar with God's law. Yet they persecuted and rejected him, choosing to remain subject to Caesar, and it was Caesar who eventually destroyed them. God's punishment also fell heavily on the Romans. Hearing of Christ's works, death, and resurrection, Emperor Tiberius proposed to the Roman Senate that he be adored as God. But the senators refused, preferring the emperor to the King of Heaven. In reply, God stirred their own emperors against them, causing most of the Senate to be destroyed, and the city of Rome to be afflicted for nearly 300 years. Tiberius became a tyrant, killing his own mother, his nephews, the princes of the city, and his own counselors. Suetonius reported him to be so stern that on one day alone he saw 20 people executed. Pilate, under whom Christ was crucified, was sent to Rome and banished to the town of Vienne in Daphne, where he eventually committed suicide. Agrippa the elder was even imprisoned by Tiberius for some time. After Tiberius's death came Caligula, who demanded to be worshipped as a god. He banished Herod Antipas, the murderer of John the Baptist and condemner of Christ, and was assassinated in the 4th year of his reign. Following 13 cruel years under Claudius, the people of Rome fell under the power of Nero, who reigned for 14 years, killing most of the Roman Senate and destroying the whole Roman order of knighthood. He was so cruel and inhumane that he put to death his own mother, his brother-in-law, his sister, his wife, and his instructors Seneca and Lucian. He ordered Rome set on fire in 12 places while he sang the verses of Homer. To avoid the blame for this, he accused the Christians of setting the fires and caused them to be persecuted. In the year AD 70, Titus, the father of Vespasian, destroyed Jerusalem and all of Galilee, killing over 1,100,000 Jews and selling the rest into slavery. So we see that those who refused Jesus were made to suffer for their actions. The Apostles. The first apostle to suffer after the martyrdom of Stephen was James, the brother of John. Clement tells us, when this James was brought to the tribunal seat, he that brought him, and was the cause of his trouble, seeing him to be condemned, and that he should suffer death, was in such sort moved within heart and conscience, that, as he went to the execution, he confessed himself also, of his own accord, to be a Christian. And so were they led forth together, where in the way he desired of James to forgive him for what he had done. After, James had a little paused within himself upon the matter. Turning to him he said, Peace be to thee, brother, and kissed him, and both were beheaded together. A.D. 36. Thomas preached to Parthians, Medes, Persians, Carameans, Hyrcanians, Bactrians, and Magicans. He was killed in Calamina, India. Simon, brother of Jude and James the younger, who were all sons of Mary Cleophas and Alphaeus, was bishop of Jerusalem after James. He was crucified in Egypt during the reign of the Roman Emperor Trajan. Simon the Apostle, called Canaeus, and Zealots, preached in Mauritania, Africa, and Britain. He was also crucified. Mark, the first bishop of Alexandria, preached the gospel in Egypt. He was burned and buried in a place called Buclonus during Trajan's reign. Bartholomew is said to have preached in India and translated the Gospel of Matthew into their tongue. He was beaten, crucified, and beheaded in Albanopolis, Armenia. Andrew, Peter's brother, preached to the Scythians, Sogdians, and the Saith in Sebastopolis, Ethiopia, in the year 80. He was crucified by Aegeus, the governor of the Edessians, and buried in Petra, in Achaia. Bernard and Saint Cyprian mention the confession and martyrdom of this blessed apostle. Partly from them and partly from other reliable writers we gather the following material. When Andrew, through his diligent preaching, had brought many to the faith of Christ, Aegeus, the governor, asked permission of the Roman Senate to force all Christians to sacrifice to the honor of the Roman idols. Andrew thought he should resist Aegeus, and went to him, telling him that a judge of men should first know and worship his judge in heaven. While worshiping the true God, Andrew said, he should banish all false gods and blind idols from his mind. Furious at Andrew, Aegeus demanded to know if he was the man who had recently overthrown the temple of the gods and persuaded men to become Christians, a quote, superstitious sect that had recently been declared illegal by the Romans. Andrew replied that the rulers of Rome didn't understand the truth. The Son of God, who came into this world for man's sake, taught that the Roman gods were devils, enemies of mankind, teaching men to offend God and causing him to turn away from them. By serving the devil, men fall into all kinds of wickedness. Andrew said that after they die, nothing but their evil deeds are remembered. The proconsul ordered Andrew not to preach these things any more, or he would face a speedy crucifixion. Whereupon Andrew replied, I would not have preached the honor and glory of the cross if I feared the death of the cross. He was condemned to be crucified for teaching a new sect and taking away the religion of the Roman gods. Andrew, going toward the place of the execution and seeing the cross waiting for him, never changed his expression, neither did he fail in his speech. His body fainted not, nor did his reason fail him, as often happens to men about to die. He said, O cross, most welcome and longed for, with a willing mind, joyfully and desirously I come to you, being the scholar of him which did hang on you, because I have always been your lover and yearned to embrace you.